Wow. Pura vida, mi gente. Much love and respect to all of you. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys taking the time to do that. Today we're just gonna continue reading a chapter of this great book we've been reading, corroborating with a lot of the research we've done in the past. All right. That book is called History of America Before Columbus, according to documents and approved authors by P. DeRue. Right, again, member of the Archaeological Club of the Land Van Ways and the United States Catholic Historical Society, honorary member of the American Catholic Historical Society of Philadelphia. This is volume 1. We're going to get into volume 2 as well later on. This was written in 1900. And before I continue, I just want to remind everybody that because we have read 5 previous chapters of this book, we already have a playlist ready for you. If you missed the previous episodes, the previous chapters, which is a lot of good drop we've gone over, actually. These are the videos right here. You can find the playlist if you go to my main page, click on the playlist tab, and you'll find all my playlists. This one right here is called History of America Before Columbus, okay? And you'll be able to see all these previous videos that we got on this book, all right? And today we're going to continue where we left off. We're going to move on to chapter 8 of this volume 1 of this book. And it says here, Civilization of Ancient America. You know, be ready to dodge the hijack, if any, and be ready to pull out the babies from this book, from this chapter, right? We are almost afraid to state that the most ancient nations of America had attained a high degree of civilization. For indeed, this assertion contradicts twice the pet theory of quite a class of scientists, all right? Because, remember, he's saying this because they teach us that it was just savages here. This is the new world. There was nothing here, no high civilization. That's what they teach us in school, right? But he's like, that's a pet theory. So it's like controversial to say, oh, there was a high degree of civilization here in ancient America. The novel modern law of perpetual human progress, according to which our contemporary redskins should all be artists and philosophers, while their oldest predecessors on this continent should have borrowed or burrowed in the earth, stupid as brutes, if they were not brutes altogether, we feel reassured. However, in considering that the species theory is not endorsed either by venerable authors of old or by learned men of modern times, and we shall prove that it is not in accord with stubborn facts. Many ancient people of the Orient, if not all of them, says Psalm, were firm believers in the Golden Age, an age of justice and happiness, which distinguished the first era of the world's history from all subsequent periods, and placed the beginnings of humanity on a much higher level than our race has since been able to attain. Then, says Hesiod in his Works and Days, without chagrin or disquiet, exempt from labor and sorrow, men lived like gods. All right, in the Golden Age. Remember, we got books we read on this, and Columbus said, and a lot of these Spaniards and colonists, conquistadors, when they came, they wrote that when they met the Indians, they were living like the people in the Golden Age. Do you guys remember that? People enjoyed, even in advanced years, the pleasures of youth. All right? Old people, living like young people. And death to them was but a sweet sleep. A fruitful earth spontaneously furnished the most delicious fruits. All right? The most delicious fruits is what I was saying. We had all this abundance of food here. There's fruits hanging from the trees and all that. And the abundance thereof removed all occasion of envy. The peaceful and voluntary occupation which they found in providing for their daily needs removed the tedium of leisure and the weariness entailed by idleness. We have no positive proof to say that primordial Americans enjoyed paradisian bliss. All right? What did they enjoy? Paradise. The bliss of being in paradise. These primordial Americans, these indigenous Americans. Although the statement of the great poet has its counterpart in the tradition of several Indian tribes, one of which was written down by a Chippewa native poet, and is here annexed. Sir William Dawson and his Fossil Man, and Southall and his Recent Origin of Man, declared it an unfounded assumption that primitive man was a savage. What we have said before may convince any unprejudiced reader that our prehistoric nations, the mound builders, the Mayas, and the Pueblos, were no savages, okay? No savages. And the description of Atlantis, which we have read from Plato's Critias, strikingly confirms the conclusive tale told us in regard to the advanced civilization of the primitive inhabitants of the Western world by the relics of the grand and artistic monuments of America's primitive races. Again, where was Atlantis? What was Plato talking about? Ancient Americas. It was connected to the ancient Americas. This is what he's just telling you right now. Okay? Advanced people. But little more should be required to prove the thesis which we set forth as a conclusion of the foregoing chapter. Proceeding from north to south, we find from distance to distance unmistakable traces of mighty, skillful, and learned nations that had either wholly disappeared from the face of the earth or had become degenerated and degraded to such an extent as to be unrecognizable at the time of not only the Spanish, but even of the Northman discoveries. All right, so something had happened. That advanced people, that golden age was no more by the time the Spanish kind of got here, the colonists. Vestiges of artistic progress are left in America's northernmost regions, but its date could not be assigned, says von Humboldt. W. Gleason relates that shortly before leaving Lower California, the Jesuits discovered in the mountains several extensive caves hewn out of the solid rock, like those of Elephanta in southern Hindustan. And these painted on the rock were representations of men and women decently clad, as well as different species of animals. One of the caves is described by a missionary as 50 feet long, 15 high, and formed in the manner of an arch. The entrance being entirely open, there was sufficient light to observe the painted figures. The males were represented with their arms extended and somewhat elevated, while one of the females appeared with her hair flowing loosely over her shoulders and a crown of feathers on her head. Those pictures did not reproduce the modern tribes, whose males entirely dispensed with clothes, had not the least idea of artistic painting, nor were in possession of tools to dig comfortable habitations in the heart of the rock, but they gave convincing evidence of a more ancient population, more enlightened and more advanced in material civilization, as it was also of greater physical stature. All right, physical stature, taller. What did they found in the mounds, right? The latter is confirmed as well by the assertions of the inhabitants, who unanimously affirmed to the first Christian missionaries the prior existence of a powerful, gigantic race, as by the fossil remains they are discovered, right? The bones, for instance, by the human skeleton measuring 11 feet, an 11-footer, guys, listen, found by Father Joseph Rotea at the mission of Cadacamon, all right, in California. This Indian tradition in regard to a previous gigantic race is widespread among the native races of the Pacific coast. The historian of these numerous tribes does not unreasonably explain it in the following manner. It results, he says, from the existence of grand ruins in many parts of the country, far beyond the constructive powers of the savage native, and therefore, in his eyes, the work of giants, as they were intellectually, when compared with their degenerated descendants, whom the conquistadors met in New Spain. The Mayas were intellectual giants indeed. The ruins of their vast public works, of their costly edifices, of their sculptures and paintings, and of their finely carved symbolic writings attest the height of a civilization of which we might well be proud today. And yet all these evidences of a glorious past lay buried for long centuries before Columbus's discovery in the virgin forest of Yucatan. All right, that's the hijack when they say Columbus discovery, because you can't discover a place that already had people, right? But and then, we know that's not his name, but we're just going with that time frame basically before that guy came and his people, which were black folks. Remember, so-called Columbus was a Sephardic Jew, Portuguese Sephardic Jew. What did we learn the other day? They were very dark complexioned. So Palenque, Uxmal, Copan, and several other ruined cities of Central America are as grand and beautiful monuments on the cemeteries of the New World as are Troy, Babylon, and Thebes on those of the Old. And their antiquity does not seem to be less venerable. They certainly pertain to America's remotest period. I would say, what if Troy and ancient Babylon and the real Thebes was here? They compared Palenque to Thebes, when they found it. America is a true old world. So that's why it is as grand as those places and beautiful. But they are from a very ancient past, as he's saying here. They were ruins more than they are now in the 16th century. So remember when the so-called Spaniards got here in the 1500s and all that, they were finding all these ancient cities and ruins. Now you go, they're a little fixed up. They got the tours and you can go as a tourist and they're cleaned up. But when these people got here, these Europeans, these were laying in ruins in the middle of the jungle, things growing all over them, guys. The natives of the neighboring region knew nothing of their origin, and no notice whatever of the existence of such cities appears in the annals of the surrounding civilized nations during the 8th or 9th centuries preceding the Spanish conquest. Bancroft is even of the opinion that the Maya grandeur was already at its height several centuries before Christ. Talking about BC times. Talking about real ancient here, guys. We might here recall to mind a pertinent remark of the learned von Humboldt, saying, I do not pretend that no intellectual culture or social order has reigned in New Spain before the time of the Aztecs, for we know that the Toltecs, successors to the Mayas, possessed a hieroglyphic writing, all right, and knew astronomy well enough to have a more correct idea of the year's duration than most European nations, although they had sunk into a degradation already before the 11th century of our era. Talking about the 1000s. So that's what I'm saying. These Toltecs, these nations were there way before the so-called Aztec came in the 1300. The same author makes a similar observation in regard to the South American Aborigines, because that's what we were talking about, the indigenous people here. We know he says that the Peruvian tribes were falling to the lowest level of brutality before the mysterious arrival of the Incas. There you go. So just like the Aztecs were Johnny latecomers, the Incas were as well. They are not the ancient people of Peru, even though they get a lot of the credit because they were the ones ruling when the Europeans arrived. But as he's saying, there was already a high civilization there had fallen to the lowest level of brutality before the Incas got there. Horn's sickening description of their horrid savagery leaves no doubt of the geographer's assertion. Yet there are vestiges, he adds, of civilization in Peru anterior to the celestial monuments of Cusco, on the shores of Lake Titicaca in Peru. Remember, we just read a chapter, not I believe about a month ago, a couple weeks ago, on Lake Titicaca, how old it probably really is and it was at the shores of the ocean, because that's high elevation now. It seems that Lake Titicaca had risen. That's how old it is, guys. We're talking about thousands of years old, according to a lot of researchers. So on the shores of Lake Titicaca in Peru still endure imposing remains of Cyclopean architecture, which the Peruvians themselves acknowledge to be of older date than the advent of the Incas, way before the Incas, and to have furnished these with the models of their later buildings. The imperishable remains of the oldest architecture in Peru ought to be of themselves sufficient evidence of a civilization that was never equaled in historic times. All right? never equaled. The most interesting are those of the palace or temple near the village of Tiwanaku, on the southern side of Lake Titicaca. They consist of a quadrangular space entered by the famous monolithic doorway and surrounded with large stones standing on end, and of a hill or mound encircled with ruins of a wall consisting of enormous blocks of stone. The whole covers an area about 1,200 feet long and 1,050 feet wide. There is a lesser temple about a quarter of a mile distant, containing stones 36 feet long by 7 broad, and others of 16 by 26 feet, having recesses chiseled in them, which have been compared to seats of judgment. The weight of 2 of those stones has been calculated at from 142 tons each. 142 tons, guys. Each. How did they move that? Are we talking about geopolymer? Shout out to Paul Cook. Pro now gives us similar information. In the ruins of Tiwanaku, he says, are to be found stones 25 feet long and 6 feet thick. And in one of its smaller temples lies a stone of nearly 8 feet wide, that is 37 feet in length. Their average weight is estimated at 200 tons. All right, 200 tons. The wonder waxes greater when we reflect that at no quarries could be found in or near Tiwanaku. Right, no quarries nearby. So where do they get them from? This is why we're saying maybe Paul Cook is onto something with this ancient type of granite cement, geopolymer that these ancient people used, created to construct all these so-called megalithic buildings. These huge masses were hauled a distance of from 18 to 48 miles over a country like that where the ruins remain. The monolithic portal of the palace of Tiwanaku is 1 block of hard trachytic rock, now deeply sunk into the ground. Its height above the ground is 7 feet 2 inches, its width 13 feet 5 inches, its thickness 1 foot and a half, and the opening is 4 feet and a half by 2 feet 9 inches. The outer side is ornamented with accurately cut niches and rectangular moldings. The whole of the inner side, from a line level with the upper lintel of the doorway to the top, is a mass of sculpture, which speaks to us in difficult riddles, alas, of the customs and art culture, of the beliefs and traditions of a bygone race, and of a wonderful ancient and lost civilization. Ancient lost civilization, all right? So-called Atlantis, huh? Lemuria, huh? The masonry of the ruins is admirably worked, according to the testimony of all visitors. Squire says the stone itself is dark and exceedingly hard, trachyte. It is faced with a precision that no skill can excel. Its lines are perfectly drawn, and its right angles turned with an accuracy that the most careful geometer could not surpass. I do not believe, he adds, there exists a better piece of stone cutting, the material considered on this or on the other continent. Nothing like this in the world, not even in the so-called old world on the other side. He's saying that, letting you know that was Squire, right? These are people surveying, archaeologists, anthropologists going to these places, letting you know there's nothing like this in the world. From all this, Windsor draws a conclusion, which a moment's reflection will perfectly justify. There is a reason, he says, to believe that a powerful empire had existed in Peru centuries before the rise of the Inca dynasty. All right? Way before the Inca, okay? Sacsayhuaman, all right? Sacsayhuaman in Cusco. Now remember, we got videos on this. You know, we have a lot of corroboration to say that this might be the actual ancient city of David. Sacsayhuaman, the fortress, the citadel of David, as it's going to tell you here. Sacsayhuaman, the fortress overlooking the city of Cusco, just like the city of David was over the main part of Jerusalem, overlooking. There was 2 cities in Jerusalem, 2 parts of it. So Sacsayhuaman, the fortress overlooking the city of Cusco, is beyond comparison the grandest monument of an ancient civilization in the New World. Like the pyramids and the Colosseum, it is imperishable. At Ollantaytampu or Tambo, the ruins are of various styles, but the latter works are raised on ancient Cyclopean foundations. There are 6 porphyry slabs, or 6 or 7 feet by 12 feet high, stone beams 15 and 20 feet long, stairs and recesses hewn out of the solid rock. It is clear from the evidence of the most careful investigators, such as Ciesa de Leon, that there was no real knowledge of the origin of these wonders at the time of the Incas. We should here be allowed to make a suggestion, namely that the breaches made by the elements and time in the monuments of Titicaca and Sacsayhuaman be filled up with modern brick walls and further fitted out with all modern improvements for the comfortable accommodation of all such scientists and anthropologists, especially who suffer with the mania of necessary human progress and of a progress generally, and who refuse to see that at the very beginning of humanity, inasmuch as history and archaeology are able to testify, man was civilized to such a degree as to put to shame even the least important, the material manifestations of human intelligence being taken into consideration, the proud, self-complacent elect. We shall not say of modern science, but of modern literature. The comparison between the grand, lasting, inimitable achievements of a nation anterior to the Incas and the frail works of modern progress should be a revelation to them, and allow them henceforth to scan their own species with sane, naked eyes. Future explorers are likely to discover in Chile and in Patagonia ruins as interesting as those of Peru. But walking on paths opened already, we shall cross the Andes to find further traces of primeval American civilization in the ancient graveyards of the Ancon, in the trenches of the Amazon, and on the islands of Marajo. Suffice it to state that there, as well as all along the Pacific coast, there are evident traces of a race anterior to the modern Indians, and most interesting for its advanced degree of civilization. All these are some of the physical evidences of the material progress of the first inhabitants of our Western Hemisphere. And this material civilization, if we may use that expression, is a significant token of their mental condition, for it is well known that the mind has ever directed the hand. Baldwin truthfully asserts, in general, that the most ancient people of antiquity, at the earliest periods in which we can see and study them, show us that civilization was older than their time. It is apparent in their architecture, in the varied possessions and manifestations of their civilized life, in their riches and magnificence, and in the splendor of their temples and royal palaces, that they had many the arts and sciences which we deem modern. No reader can expect direct and absolute proof that America's primeval aborigines were in possession of civilization, justly so called, that all their faculties of body, mind, and heart were bearing fruitful blossom. But we have all reasons to admit that their society was built upon the deepest foundations of true civilization, all right? True civilization, upon the belief in one true God, all right? The Great Spirit, and upon the practice of offering sacrifices to Him, the first fruits, right? Almost like Israelites, right? Plato's Critias is explicit on this latter particular, and modern science has clearly established that monotheism, the only rational religion, becomes the more apparent as we extend farther our reaches into the history of the nations, not only of Asia, but of America as well. It is a question as interesting as difficult to determine what was the source of America's primordial civilization. Were the vaunted theory of progress as true as it is false? Were it a law of nature as it is an expression of modern pride? it would be but a facile induction that our most ancient and wonderful monuments were erected by a race that had slowly but surely developed from the most abject barbarism to a state of admirable culture. We could not historically contradict this plausible assertion, but should it rest on fact, we would, by right of the same inductive reasoning, expect to find our redskins, copper-colored tribes, red, what kind of red? Red brown, huh? Not in the huts and wigwams wherein they live, but in palaces, all right? Not in teepees and just wigwams or just huts. It was ancient Americans living in palaces, okay? Built of carved and polished mountain peaks. The savagery of our Indians, as well as the abject condition of millions of Africans, and, in fact, of all nations upon whom never shone the light of Christianity, is a sufficient rebuke of a theory held by thoughtless pedants, by misnomer entitled modern scientists. The rude African tribes described by Agathocles of old, and lately by James Bruce, have not improved their condition. Thousands of years have passed over them without bringing them any material or mental progress, any melioration or discovery. Were not the conclusion of a saddening comparison between the evident culture of ancient American aborigines and the condition of our modern Indians a sufficient ground for our objection? We might further adduce the statements of other scientists whose learning and wisdom have sustained their renown for many centuries. Hesiod, as intimated before, together with the majority of the earlier Greek and Oriental writers, regarded mankind as having descended from a higher to a lower plane, and stated that people of the latter periods of the world's history appeared degraded when compared with those who lived happy and godlike lives in the golden age of humanity's beginning. Modern archaeology seconds ancient philosophy, according to the brilliant researches of Dr. Schleiman at Hisarlik, the site of ancient Troy, and at Mycenae. There was neither a Stone Age nor a Metal Age in Greece and Asia Minor. Stone, bronze, and iron are utterly confounded in the strata uncovered by the scientific excavations at Troy, and the deeper the diggings, the more manifest are the evidences of advanced culture. Rousseau's pure state of nature has been discovered nowhere yet, while on the contrary, as soon as we step over the limits of Christian realms, we meet with degrading unnatural vices, such as polygamy, drunkenness, debauchery, idolatry, and with consequent misery of the masses and depopulation. Every stage and degree of barbarism is, therefore, a falling off from a higher culture, more in conformity with the innate dictates of the human reason and heart. Man was born to go astray, and he went astray, says a modern infidel philosopher, and Nadialak, though in very mild terms, applies the principle to our special subject when saying, the still enduring monuments of prehistoric American aborigines would appear to justify a belief that the Indians once possessed a civilization superior to the condition to which their descendants have been reduced by defeat or indulgence in too much alcohol and other causes. Ancient civilization is attested by eloquent ruins, and present degradation stalks under our eyes. Yet the two extremes should not command a universal verdict for all time. And we are of the opinion that the Costa, right? The Costa, Sephardic Jews, gives the truthful history of American civilization, condensed in a few words when he writes, from the mounds and other prehistoric monuments found in America, we can only infer that, age after age, nations and tribes rose to greatness and then fell into decline, barbarism, and rude culture holding alternate sway. The final results, however, of all these oscillations proves rather unfavorable, and all the territories of the New World, where the Church found no opportunity yet to exert her beneficial influence upon the natives. The meditations of a late serious thinker have partly become American history and, no doubt, are prophecy as well. In the same measure, says Kastner, that the knowledge of the true God becomes darkened in man's heart, superstitious ideas extends their influence, egotism develops and causes selfishness, and revenge to take the place of pity and mercy. Brutal instincts replace reason and infect the soul with savage propensities, and their consequences are homicidal orgies and all the sequels of abominations and infamies, which, which at all times were the inseparable company of idolatry and devil worship. Why did God doom to destruction and anathema the ancient inhabitants of Palestine? Because they did works hateful to thee, O Lord, by their sorceries and wicked sacrifices. And those merciless murderers of their children and eaters of man, bowels and devourers of blood, when they swore by thee, and those parents sacrificing their own hands, helpless souls, it was thy will to destroy them by the hands of our parents, that the land which is of all most dear to thee might receive a worthy colony of the children of God. Philanthropic hearts honestly bewail the gradual extinction of our Indian tribes under the fatherly care of our government, but historians rather busy themselves with the past and inquire into the actual origin of the high culture that rendered immortal the ancestors or predecessors of our despised and vanishing aboriginal races. All right, you're still here. H. Bancroft slightingly states that a former vicar general of the Catholic Diocese of Boston, the Reverend Brazier de Bourbourg, all right, a Catholic Reverend Brazier, the famous Brazier de Bourbourg, attempts to prove that all civilization originated in America. What? All right. All civilization originated in America, according to Brazier de Bourbourg, or in the Occident instead of in the Orient, as he has always been supposed. And a few pages farther, he seems to endorse or even improve upon the same theory. When misled by prejudice, he pens the following lines: "It only remains now to speak of the theory which ascribes the autochthonic origin to the Americans." All right, natural to this place, not coming from anywhere else. That's according to Bourbourg, right? And he continues saying, "The time is not long past when such a supposition would have been regarded as impious, and even at this day, its advocates may expect discouragement, if not rebuke, from certain quarters. It is nevertheless an opinion worthy of the greatest consideration, and one which, if we may judge by the recent results of scientific investigation, may eventually prove to be scientifically correct." All right, America had its own people, not coming from anywhere else. Here since creation, the true old world. The theories of Bancroft and Brazier are inseparably connected and are absolutely true on the simple condition that Adam and Eve were created in America. All right, you guys hear that? Adam and Eve were created in America, for it is from Adam, as the Greek lexicographer Suidas correctly states, that arts and sciences are derived. Should not, however, such be the case, or should be the first inhabitants of our hemisphere have groveled in barbarism, as it is admitted no less gratuitously than generally, then it is evident that prehistoric civilization was imported into America, because as man gather no grapes of thorns nor figs of thistles, so cannot the causes of savagery, error, and immorality develop into the foundations of civilization. Truth and ethics cannot be obtained but from the mouth of a well-informed teacher. Richard Whiteley affirms that nations may become degraded, but that no nation unaided by a superior race ever succeeded in raising itself out of barbarism. Such is the very nature of barbarism, says Hornius, that unless it be reformed by foreigners, it will grow worse and worse. The fact is that Christian Europe is needed today to lift up from degradation the Redskins of America. All right, dodge the hijack. You see what I'm saying? This guy's Christian. So he's like, oh, they must be, the Christian's going to help them. Christianity's going to help them come out of this barbarism. What happened to them, right? As well as the Negroes of Africa, so-called Negroes of Africa. There was Negroes here too, all right? Didn't we just see a video the other day showing the stones, sculptures, what they're finding all over the Americas, depictions of so-called Negroes? But these were, again, autochthonous to the Americas, as he was just saying earlier. And that a similar fact took place of old appears from the ancient traditions of our aborigines. All the American culture heroes present the same general characteristics, says Bancroft. They are all described as white bearded men. That's a false, that's the hijack. They did describe them as white bearded, not that they're pale, that they were white, their skin. White bearded could be anybody. Black folks have white beard too when they get older, right? So that's a very strong wrong statement. They are all described as white, he says. That's the hijack. Bearded men, generally clad in long robes, appearing suddenly and mysteriously upon the scene of their labors. They at once set about improving the people by instructing them in useful ornamental arts, giving them laws, exhorting them to practice brotherly love and other Christian virtues, and in introducing a better and milder form of religion. In such guise or on such missions did Quetzalcoatl appear in Cholula, Botan in Chiapas, Huixepecocha in Oaxaca, Samna and Cuculcan with his 19 disciples in Yucatan, Gucumatz in Guatemala, Viracocha in Peru, Sume and Hayetome in Brazil, the mysterious apostle mentioned by Rosales in Chile, and Bochica in Colombia. So, according to the research of a lot of people, these may be the same people, and thus the hijack. They're not talking about, and any of these primary sources or any of the legends of these people that they were pale skinned, they say white bearded. White bearded. That doesn't mean they had pale skin. All right. Since prehistoric American civilization was most probably of foreign origin, probably. So again, this author, even though he's saying, he's giving a lot of drop, he goes with the theory that it was probably inhabited by some other part of the world in ancient times, and then they created civilization here. So why didn't they do that anywhere else first? So people came from Asia or whatever, so-called Asia, because this is Asia too, right? Asia Major, India Superior. But he's saying people came over here and then developed the highest form of civilization and everything here. Why didn't they do it where they were coming from? Huh? From what parts of the old world was it imported? This is the old world. You understand? To what nations of the eastern continent belonged the first American culture heroes, or was it more likely the first civilized races that settled on our Western hemisphere? All right, he's asking a question he don't know. This question introduces us to the difficult and intricate researches regarding the various settlements of foreign peoples on American soil in prehistoric times, before the advent of the heavenly civilizer and redeemer of the world. All right, he's gonna, dodge the hijack. He's gonna say Jesus, dodge the hijack big time, right? He's the civilizer and redeemer. There was civilization before that so-called time period that Christianity adds. So-called Jesus, right? Most high over everything. Most high over everything. Talking about one God, as it says in Isaiah, one Savior, the first commandment, no other gods before me. The most high over everything, guys. And if you feel uncomfortable with me saying that, then you might be in the wrong channel, because you're not ready to let go. You're not ready to let go of religious indoctrination and beliefs. Continuing, were we allowed to base our conclusions on the civil and religious condition of our Indians at the time of and after the Spanish discovery, we would confidently make the assertion that some of the civilized nations of Asia and Christian people of Europe had taken possession of the central and occidental portions of our continent, driving a former brutalized race towards both northeastern and southeastern parts. But the very question is to find the source of a more ancient culture, of the still attested glory of the American nations that had fallen so low many centuries already before historic times. The learned have expressed all kinds of opinions on this subject, but we find only two facts that may safely guide us in this research, namely, the striking similarity which exists between the most ancient ruins of Central America and Peru and those of various islands in Polynesia and the Asiatic India. And secondly, the enduring universality and clearness of certain pre Christian traditions. All right, so again, they're trying to say, oh, because they're similar to Southeast Asia, then they might have come over here, but they're seen in reverse. And because they find traditions in ancient America, what they're trying to, classify as Christian traditions, oh, it must have been Christians that came here before them. Starts to hijack, because a lot of the stuff, like they're saying they find a cross here, just because they find the symbol of the cross here, they say, oh, people that were Christians probably came here and introduced that. So this is what he's talking about here. So we got to dodge the hijack. This is what I told you in the beginning. Let's be ready to dodge some of the hijack. All right. But no, just think about what he's saying. Yeah, all that stuff was here. And all the similarities to other cultures of the ancient world that were here. So again, this is the true old world. They've been seeing it in reverse. We have no space here to give many particulars and establish the stated similarity. Suffice it to remark that all the principal characteristics of ancient American monuments, their cyclopean material, their plastering, their painting, their sculptures, their hieroglyphics, and their general plan correspond to those of the ruins discovered in the woods of India, in Java, and in Polynesia, right? Just like the ones over there. Who's the ancient Nagas? They came from here. We were traveling back and forth, trading. We were going to those areas. Yeah, a lot of those are distant cousins to ancient Americans. Thus also, and in particular near the mouth of the Euphrates, have inscriptions been found dating back to 4000 BC. There were two races, the Akkadi and the Sumeri, who ruled in these parts, building great cities and temples. And I would say all those ancient cultures were here. We do have an Acadia up in Canada, right? And that's the hijack when it comes to Sumerians. There's no such people. The Sumerians were Cimmerians, were real, but anybody being called Sumerian, that's not a nation. That was people who dwelled in a place they were referring to as Summer. So if you came out of Summer, you were called a Sumerian, just like a Californian coming out of California. That doesn't mean that they might not be Chinese, they might not be indigenous, they might not be, from Mexican, they might be from many parts of the world, but they're living in that area. Some recent discoveries make it not unlikely that, at a very early stage of its development, the Akkad civilization formed the basis of the wonderful civilization of Egypt. Again, and ancient Egypt was here to marry, right? And there are traces of its extension eastward into the lands of the Dravida and of the Cambodians in the two Indian peninsulas, and possibly from ancient Cambodia across the ocean to the lands of the Quiches, the Mayas, and the Quichuas in America. Possibly, he's guessing, again, they've been seeing this in reverse, guys. We came out from here. Quiches and Quichuas, huh? The Mayas, huh? Who is the ancient Nagas? They came out of these people. From the first, the Akkadi seem to have built upon terraces, both to remove their edifices above the low alluvial plain and to give them an imposing appearance. The great structures of Ur rose in terraces. Its brick walls were decorated with blue enamel, polished agates, alabaster, marble slabs, mosaics, copper nails, and gold plates. Right? All this stuff they're saying, they're finding over there in the Mesopotamia. They haven't even found none of this stuff. They're talking about descriptions from the paintings on the wall and stuff like that. Remember where Ur or Chaldea was, guys? That's in Ireland. So the geography, where they're telling us all these ancient places are, a lot of them are wrong, guys. And we've gone over that in many, many presentations, right? Continues, says, there was great splendor of adornment. Rafters of palm wood supported the roofs. And again, it is pretty well agreed that humanity's oldest traditions recorded in the Bible have been preserved better in America. Listen, come on now, come on. This is a big one right here. Listen to what he's about to say. Even though he just said they might have come from somewhere else, right? He's saying it is pretty well agreed. Many researchers, many anthropologists, many historians have agreed that humanity's oldest traditions recorded in the Bible have been preserved better in America than they have been among the ancient nations of the old world, meaning the other parts of the world. Why would that be, guys? Why would the oldest traditions of the Bible be more preserved here in America? Come on now, use your logic than anywhere else in the world. Use your logic. Come on, this is the true old world. This is the promised lands. These are the biblical lands, the biblical people. Many nations, not just Israelites, not just Hebrews. Let's not generalize. If we accept the Jewish people, listen to what he's saying, so-called Jewish, that's a hijack word. That's a hijack word. It is impossible, says Viscount Kingsborough, all right, Lord Kingsborough. Listen to what he's going to say. On reading what Mexican mythology records of war in heaven and of the fall of Sotemoque and the other rebellious spirits, of the creation of light by the word of Tonacatecutli, and of the division of the waters, of the sin of Itztlacohuqui, and his blindness and nakedness, of the temptation of Suchiquecal, and her disobedience in gathering roses from a tree, and of the consequent misery and disgrace of herself and all her posterity, not to recognize scriptural analogies. All right, it's impossible if you start really doing the research here, because a lot of people who are stuck in out of Asia or out of Africa theories, they've never studied these codices. They never studied the mythology here, the stories, the archaeology, so they don't know. And when we're saying America's a true old world, they get all offended and they get all crazy, literally start throwing tantrums. A lot of them get disrespectful because they've never really studied this stuff. They've been biased to one side of the world and biased to false narratives that they can't even prove. It's just based on beliefs. But the Mexican tradition of the deluge is that which bears the most unequivocal marks of having been derived from a Hebrew source, all right? Because they are of Hebrew source. Let the narration be interrupted a moment to remark that the source of those traditions need not necessarily be, and is not likely, a Hebrew source, since they relate facts which are recorded in the last and not in the first book of Holy Scripture. Listen to what he's going to say. But it is rather the distorted information which originated with the proximate progeny of Noah, or Noah, that spread all over the earth after the confusion of their language and was afterwards confirmed by the Christian apostles and immigrants. So he's saying just because they're finding Hebrew traditions here doesn't mean that it's from a Hebrew source, because he's saying, oh, remember, people spread after Noah and the Tower of Babylon, the confused. So what? Again, they're not trying to give credit to ancient America for being the origin of these people, of these stories, guys. And then Christians came. What Christian apostles and immigrants? Starts to hijack. We refer our readers to document I or 1 ABC and continue the relation of Kingsborough. This tradition of the deluge records, he says, that a few persons escaped in a huehuete, or ark of fur, when the earth was swallowed up by the deluge, the chief of whom was named Patecatle or Zipaquetona, that he invented the art of making wine, that Shalua, one of his descendants, at least one of those who escaped with him in the ark, was present at the building of a high tower, which the succeeding generation constructed with a view of escaping from the deluge. Should it occur again, that Tonacatecutli, incensed at their presumption, destroyed the tower with lightning, confounded their language, and dispersed them, and that Shalua led the colony to the New World. It didn't say nothing about that last part, because we had read the actual story of Shalua, guys, in the video I did with the pyramid of Cholula in Mexico. All right. So what he's pointing out, though, that these things were written in these ancient codices and Mexico. Same stories of the Bible, right? And we have so many videos relating this, right? Be logical, but everything else we've corroborated, everything else they have found here in ancient America, this is the true old world. According to the native Mexican historian Itztli Xochitl, the Toltec tradition relates that after the confusion of tongues, the 7 families who spoke the Toltec language set out for the New World. Now, see, this is what I'm saying. Where were they coming from? Where it doesn't say nothing about no New World. That term was not written in those times. There was no such thing in the codices as talking about, oh, the New World and Old World. New World, that's a modern term. The Europeans or people in our modern time history started using, right? So that doesn't say that. And wandered 104 years over large extents of land and water. That doesn't, America's big, guys. And it was connected to ancient Asia. It was connected to other parts. There's a lot of, migration going on in ancient America. But that doesn't mean they were coming from what they want us to think, Mesopotamia over there, the Middle East over there. Finally, they arrived at Huehue Tlapalan in the year 1 Flint, 520 years after the flood. And it seems that Huehue Tlapalan is North America, guys. All these mound builder cultures, whether it's, in Utah or in the Mississippi Valley, it was in North America. All right. These and similar traditions are found all over the American continent, among people of all grades of barbarism and civilization, to such an extent that it seems unlikely that they should have originated with the unimportant, dubious Hebrew immigrants, whom but few learned men admit to have reached our hemisphere. All right? This is the biblical lens. They've been here. You just said earlier, Adam and Eve, right? Somebody's saying Adam and Eve was created here, huh? Nor were they first taught by Christianity, of which they form but secondary tenets, and which had not illumined some of the aboriginal tribes when they gave evidence of certain knowledge of the deluge and of the confusion of tongues at the Tower of Babel, as recorded in Holy Scripture. So he's just trying to discredit it. He's trying to explain why these people had these stories and not really, giving them the full credit. Like, oh, it must have come from word of mouth from somebody else. Neither could we admit that these teachings of oldest history might have been imported by later immigrants from the countries where in most ancient times they were hardly recognizable anymore. We are therefore inclined to believe that these aboriginal traditions are simply truthful and were brought into America by the nearest descendants of the patriarch Noah. All right, they were brought by Noah. Always remember in reverse, they were here. And these are the descendants of so-called Noah, who had taken their course in the easterly direction, landing in America, right? The descendants of Noah, we're talking about Shem. Who else? Japhet, Ham, and then all their kids, right? That's what they tell us in the Bible, right? Either at Bering Strait, he's saying maybe from the Bering Strait, or after sailing through Polynesia on the western coast of Central America and Peru, as is plainly intimated by the ancient monuments of these countries. All right. So just because you find an ancient megalithic monuments here, they had to have been built by people who came here, not by actual local people. This is the oldest land, right, coming out of the waters, guys. So let's be logical. And it has the most food and sources in the world. So let's be logical. Why does it have to always be people coming in? They've been seeing it in reverse this whole time. Our continent appears, consequently, to be indebted to Eastern Asia for the glories of its most brilliant period. This is Eastern Asia. This is the farthest east. This is Asia Major. It was connected a lot more back then, guys. We've seen the old maps. So this is what I'm saying. This is a misinterpretation of history. They're trying to say that all this land, this huge continent of the Americas was uninhabited. Literally is what he's trying to say. Come on now. And how come all these Eastern Asians didn't build all that over there? Why did they have to come here? Why did they have to come here and start civilization, huh? And in spite of a great amount of literature, we subscribe to the conclusion of P. Jusset primeval American civilization is not autochthonous. You see that? He just admitted we subscribe. We actually go with what other people are saying, that there was no people here autochthonous. That's a hijack. That's the hijack. Nor was it developed by the efforts of its first savage nations. But advanced as it was imported from Eastern Asia. And again, that was this guy's opinion, P. Joseph, because they didn't know. Remember, they were still going that the Holy Land is over there. This was written in 1900s, guys. And then he's quoting people from the 1800s, 1700s who didn't know any better, who were still thinking and believing out of Africa stuff or out of Asia theories, right? This is a guy's opinion. They hadn't studied everything here, the oldest land, the agriculture, everything. They hadn't studied everything. And this guy who wrote this book, unfortunately, even though he has great drop in this book and is admitting that high civilization, it seems the first civilizers were from here and went out from here. We've already read the previous chapters. He's trying to say some primitive people, we're talking about before time was recorded, maybe came from Asia and then did all this greatness over here and brought all these stories. This is Eastern Asia, guys. This is where Marco Polo came. This is the farthest east. That's the hijack. They've been seeing it in reverse. We do not, however, intend to say that the western portion of the old world has no share at all in America's greatness before the Christian era. They're trying to say, oh, maybe from Europe too, or from Africa. You see, they're not even giving no credit to the Americas. Not a few writers defend the opinion that the Egyptians who sailed around Africa and far away into the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean left in America some architectural and linguistic vestiges of their presence, all right? You see, he's saying, oh, the Egyptians were here too, they came. This is ancient Egypt, guys. This is Tamari, man. I mean, I have to keep repeating this, and I got to correct this, you know. We're in 2024. This was written 1900, and he has his biases. He's not trying to just say, just like, you know, a lot of the people in modern times trying to research the greatness of America. They're trying to say, oh, the Phoenicians came, the Egyptians came, everybody came, but nobody was here, right? But then you're finding all this stuff here. And you just said earlier that America has preserved the oldest traditions of the Bible better than any other part of the world. Better. So use your logic. The Tyrians are mentioned as having landed on our continent, and the Phoenicians generally, who were a nation of mariners and colonists on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. What if the Mediterranean Sea, the original, was the Gulf of Mexico? This is what I'm saying, guys. By many advocates of their claim to American discoveries and settlements. But since the writer of Antiquity hardly distinguished between the mother country and its colony of Carthage, right? We shall not try to discriminate the special merits of either. So we have a Cartago in Costa Rica. We have a Cartagena, which is both those words mean Carthage, and they're very ancient places, right? So that's the hijack. We might be seeing all this in reverse. It is known that the Phoenicians were well acquainted with the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean and had regular commercial intercourse with the miners of the Scilly Islands, with the Hibernians and the English, and the inhabitants of the Baltic coast, where a number of ancient Phoenician coins have been unearthed. All right, guys, we've done a lot of videos showing you so-called Phoenicians coming out of the true Canaan, the true Holy Land here in America. Phoenician means seafarer. It's not a nation. It's a group of different peoples. Phoenicians included Israelites, Danites, the Tyrians that they're saying, and other nations. You know, shout out to the archivist. You know, he's saying it was probably more like a secret society of seafarers who had this knowledge, how to chart maps, how to navigate the world, that they kept to themselves. Seafaring peoples. And again, coming out of the true old world, America. That's the hijack with all this reverse talk. Gaffarel affords several arguments to prove that. Though the medium of the Phoenicians, the Greeks, and the Romans had a knowledge of the Alga or Weed Sea near the center of the Atlantic, Horn expresses the adventurous opinion that the Indian races of Yucatan, Cuba, Haiti, Brazil, and Patagonia are of Phoenician descent. All right. Again, Phoenician descent, huh? So wouldn't they be from here? And he assures us that the Phoenicians landed and established settlements in America at three different epochs. All right. Again, always coming in from somewhere else. They never given America credit to having its own people, people that birthed all these so-called biblical nations or historical nations, right? Which we've already proven. Just follow corn, right? The first time when they sailed in company with Atlas, right, from Atlantis, the son of Neptune, and this voyage was followed by several others. For as they, for as their colony of Carthage was often attacked by the Tyrians and the Mauritanians, some of the colonists went on board their ships and sailing past Cadiz made a new settlement on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. The undertaking proved to be so great a success that several Carthaginian families set out to join it. Other ancient writers relate the particulars in a somewhat different manner. The Carthaginians, they say, accidentally discovered a beautiful island in the Atlantic Ocean, and several of them went on to build their homes on it until the Senate decreed that such would be henceforth forbidden under the pain of death. We've gone over this story a lot. They had when they were spreading, when these people were going to Europe, they kept it a secret that they were coming from here and that there was a beautiful place, beautiful island over here. And so they told everybody else, or they made it a law to not make this public so they can keep this a secret. This version probably coincides with the second advent of the Phoenicians, according to Horn's conclusion, probably from ancient authors as Aristoteles, Theopompus, and Diodorus of Sicily, whose reports we have noticed above, and here deserve our attention again, because they afford new evidence in favor of American primeval civilization. Indeed, the Carthaginians did not, as it might be too readily imagined, meet with savage nations dwelling in caves, but with a thriving people having cities of 1 million inhabitants. All right, so listen, so-called Phoenicians coming and supposedly meeting, they were from here, but let's just go with the story. They're literally telling you there was already civilizations here. So where did those people come from? Millions of people, millions of inhabitants, and prosperous enough to have both summer and winter residences, which the Phoenicians declared to be simply magnificent. Wow, right? Like the land of Shem, both hot and cold, right? Like the land of Shem, right? Both hot and cold. According to Horn and several more authors, there was a third and last epoch of Phoenician voyages to America at the time of the Jewish King Solomon, and whose employ they sailed to Haiti, to Peru, or perhaps to Oregon. Well, that's three different places, right? Completely separate. Well, which one? See how they're guessing, but again, letting you know they were over here navigating these areas. Yeah, they were over here in order to supply the gold that was needed for the Temple of Jerusalem, right? Oh, what Jerusalem? Don't think Middle East, guys. That's a modern version of so-called Jerusalem. There have been many Jerusalems or havens. Other learned men think, however, that the famous Ophir, teeming with gold and precious stone, has been found in Sofala, on the Persian Gulf, in the island Ceylon, or in some part of the East Indies. And truly we could hardly admit Horn's statement, namely that the Phoenicians set out from the mother country, America, navigating the whole Mediterranean Sea, Gulf of Mexico, and farther westward to reach Ophir. Yeah, here, Ophir, the land of gold. When we simply read the scriptural account, and King Solomon made a fleet in Asyongaber, which is by Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom. There we go. I'm telling you, where was the real Red Sea, guys? You guys already know, based on past research we've done. Not only me and a lot of people, UBTB, shout out to all the people the Red Sea was the Gulf of California, guys. California was an island. The Red Sea, that's the original Red Sea. It was literally called the Red Sea, and you can see that in old maps of America, the Red Sea, as the Gulf of California, guy. The land of Edom, huh? Yeah, Edom was there. I'm telling you guys, if you're new to my channel, you're having a hard time listening to what I'm trying to say, you think I'm discrediting all this info, We've done the work, we've done the research, guys. Catch up. America's the true old world. And right there just showed you, right there just telling you straight up what land they're really talking about, not the fake Red Sea of today, okay? And Hiram, king of Tyre or Phoenicia, sent his servants in the fleet, sailors that had knowledge of the sea, with the servants of Solomon. And they came to Ophir, and they brought from thence 420 talents of gold. All right, we got the most gold in the world, guys. We got the most gold in the world. This is the true Gold Coast here. The text of the second Paralipomenon is almost identical with the foregoing. Then Solomon went to Osyon-Geber and to Aaloth, on the coast of the Red Sea, the Gulf of California, which is in the land of Edom, and Hiram sent him ships by the hands of his servants and skillful mariners, and they went with Solomon's servants to Ophir. It is evident that the ships and seamen of Tyre's king went to Solomon's assistance by the way of the former canal of Suez, which connected the river Nile with the Red Sea. All right, that's the hijack they're talking about over there, but this was over here, Red Sea, Gulf of California, the Colorado. They're talking about the Colorado River going into the Mississippi, or which river you talking about when you're saying Nile? Nile's the Greek word. It means great river. It just means great river. We have many great rivers in the Americas, right? Literally, the word Mississippi is an indigenous word meaning great river from the Algonquin Ojibwe people too. All right. But it is equally clear that had the fleet been destined for a westward voyage, the preparations for it would have been made in Phoenicia, havens close by Jerusalem, right? Jerusalem, and Hiram's mariners would have been spared the trouble of a circular voyage, as useless as tedious and expensive. We feel therefore further inclined to believe that Ophir lay toward the south of Jerusalem, or in some district of the Indian Ocean. Believe. Someone, however, might suppose that Solomon's gold was fetched to him from America's coast over the largest expanse of water on the globe, from America's coast, all right? America's coast. That the Phoenicians at some time landed on American soil could not well be denied in the presence of ancient reports. But as Gravier justly observes, if any vague account of their discoveries was kept, it reached us disfigured by Hellenic fanciful imagination, all right, with mythology. Oh, the Atlanteans came. It came to us through mythology, and it's been said that it's only mythology. Like when they tell the story of Atlantis and Atlanteans, that it's a place, a mythical land, right? It's not considered real history. But we're talking about a real geography, a real people, a real history. Hornius does not, however, stop at the information which he laboriously culled from ancient literature. He tries to establish the similarity of several very peculiar customs of the New World aborigines anterior to the Scythian invasion with those of the ancient Phoenicians and with other analogies. But while some of these American customs, as for instance, frequent human sacrifices, this is the only thing they always mention, right? Dash the hijack, seem to be of a relatively recent period. There are differences between the two peoples that would be hard to conciliate, such as the difference of their languages and of the hairy or bald facial skins of either. All right, so that's the hijack big time. So those two differences are not really differences. First of all, we had a lot of different languages here. You know, you found all the inscriptions of the old world here and a lot of the Hebrew similarities to a lot of these indigenous languages, right? And also, we just saw the other day, right, 2 days ago, where I uploaded that video where they're showing people with beards here all over the Americas, right, with beards, facial hair, mustaches, beards. So this is a whole misinterpreted concept, right? That was a bad reason why there would be differences. This, again, you guys see the hijack, right? We just showed that the other day. Other writers have supported that Phoenician theory by adducing the Dighton writing rock found in the Taunton River in Massachusetts, right? Phoenician writing, and which Gebelin enthusiastically affirms to be evidently a Phoenician monument. But the sagacious and learned von Humboldt cannot find any symmetrical lines on it, and declares it to be an insignificant sketch similar to those found on some Norwegian rocks, while Lewellel and Rafinsky have late very ingeniously interpreted it as a Northman monument of the 11th century of our era. In fact, this stone of Taunton River has done good service to a dozen conflicting theories and may never afford positive evidences in favor of any, just as the inscribed stone of Grave Creek Mound. All right, again, another inscription found. This is in the Mounds, right? I believe West Virginia was the place. The inscription of which consists of 22 characters confessedly alphabetic, all right, and it was Paleo Hebrew on that. 10 of these are said to correspond more and less exactly to the Phoenician, 15 to the Celtiberic, 14 to the Old British, Anglo-Saxon, or Bardic, 5 to the Runic, 4 to the Etruscan, 6 to the Ancient Gaelic, 4 to the Ancient Greek, and 7 to the Old Erse. All right, the true Old World here, the mother tongue. It is useless to produce any more pretendedly Phoenician monuments found in America. They all are equally dubious, all right? So he's not trying to give credit, guys. But we found so much here. Just please catch up on the old videos so you guys can see and make up your own mind. Bancroft carefully describes 2 Hebrew relics discovered in the United States, but the beautiful preservation of the one and the material of the other, consistent of rawhide and parchment, would hardly allow us to consider them as being of pre-Christian origin. All right, according to him, a similar remark ought to be made in regard to most analogies between the belief of the Indian tribes at the time of the Spanish conquest and the religion of the Hebrew people or Israelite people. They say Jewish, that's a made-up word. For as will appear in the sequel, it is almost certain that the Christian religion was preached at various times in America before Columbus' discovery. All right, that's the hijack. He's calling it Christian religion. He's trying to compare what ancient Americans were practicing to Christianity. That's why he's calling it Christian religion. We've already got that in previous chapters when we know it's hijack. All right. And while Christianity accepts all the fundamental tenets of Jewish dogmas and morals and highly respects the typical liturgy of the Old Testament, there is no reason to disbelieve that the apparently Judaic vestiges may be explained by the fact of early Christian missions. So he's saying, oh, that's because ancient Christians brought this over here, all those stories of the Old Testament. Gosh, the hijack. You see what I'm saying, guys? So much hijack in this truth that he puts in this book. But I know you guys you have the knowledge and wisdom to be able to discern what I'm saying. The alleged similarities actually bear the imprint of Christian teaching to such an extent as to make the judicious Waldeck assert that if the Toltecs were Jews, they must have visited the Old World to obtain the Christian dogmas apparently in their cult. Now he's saying it's cult. You see how these people hijack our history, what they're finding here, and then they add their own hijack opinions on it. If the Toltecs were Jews, if they were Hebrews or Israelites, they must have visited the Old World. This is the Old World. All right? And they copied Christian dogmas. That's the hijack. Just because they got stories that you think are Christian, right? And then he's calling it a cult. So you guys see what they think of the people here. The vestiges of former Christianity in America, besides the few other very weak arguments, have led the enthusiastic Lord Kingsborough, Brazour de Bourbourg, and several more to believe that the American copper-colored tribes are descendants of Israel. All right? They had a lot of proof, though, guys. When you start reading their books personally, this guy's going to talk bad about them. But when you actually go read what they're showing you and everything else that we've gone over in this channel in the last 8 years, you'll see they were most likely right. Or at least that the lost tribes have founded important settlements in our hemisphere. Jordan, Mayer, Crawford, Quarles, M. de Moraes, or Emmanuel probably, Eaton's, Smith, Beatty, besides the Mormons, are of that same opinion. All these people, which however does not seem to deserve any more attention today. Let's not pay attention to them, right? Because I bet you this guy has some kind of chase our heritage, this guy who's writing this. And, admitting that these people are ancient Hebrews, it would disqualify the people who are calling themselves Hebrews today. That's why They don't. They can't. And who's getting the funding for this book? Who's publishing this book for this guy? Who owned all the publishing companies? The Chazars, right? So he got to go against all these theories he's calling. Horn discusses it, but does not admit it. Bancroft has a valuable footnote from which we copy here. In opposition to the Hebrew theory, we read that Wolfe, the Jew traveler, found no Jewish traces among the tribes of North America. The Jew traveler, huh? Wolfe, huh? Wolfowitz, Wolfe. He didn't want to admit that because then that would disqualify him from being so-called Jewish. That's a made-up word. The strong trait in Hebrew compound words of inserting the syllable L or a single letter in the names of children derived from either the primary or the secondary names of the deity does not prevail in any Indian tribe known to me. Neither are circumstances attending their birth or parentages, which were so often used in the Hebrew children's names, ever mentioned in these compounds. All right, Dr. Highjack, he doesn't know all the languages. Indian children are generally named from some atmospheric phenomenon. These are no traces of the rites of circumcision, anointing, sprinkling, or washing, considered as consecrated symbols. Circumcision was reported as existing among the Sitkas on the Missouri, but a strict examination proves it to be a mistake. So this is one example they used. They found circumcision throughout many of the nations of America, not just these people. And what did they prove to make that a mistake? The Reverend T. Thorogood published in 1650 a work entitled Jews in America, or Probabilities that the Americans are of that race. We read that book. This was answered in 1652 by Sir Hammond L. Lestrange in a book entitled Americans Know Jews, or Improbabilities that the Americans are of that race, right? People that are against. Lestrange believed that America was people long before the dispersion of the Jews. Duh, this is the true old world. That doesn't mean there wasn't biblical peoples here, which took place 1500 years after the flood. So that reasoning, that's a really bad reason why they wouldn't be ancient Israelites. A strong mixture of Jewish blood would have produced distinct customs, etc., which are not to be found. The analogous customs and rites adduced by Thorogood, L. Lestrange goes on to say, are amply refuted by Acosta and other writers. Right? Acosta said, no, you're wrong, man. They are ancient Hebrews. The occasional cannibalism of the Jews was caused by famine, but that of the Americans was a usual practice. Again, dodge the hijack. You see what's going on here? Even adding hijack to the so-called Jews. The argument that the Americans are Jews because they have not the gospel is worthy only of ridicule, when we see that millions of other infidels are in the same condition. Of the Hebrew theory, Baldwin, who devotes nearly 2 pages to it, writes, this wild notion called a theory scarcely deserves so much attention, because Baldwin ain't down with that, with his Chazar friends. It is a lunatic fancy, possible only to men of a certain class, which on our time does not multiply. So these people who are against it, again, these are the people that believe in out of Africa theories, out of Asia, that the Middle East is the true Holy Land, and that's their belief. Teshuti regards the arguments in favor of the Jewish theory as unsound. Acosta notices the objection that the Jews should have preserved their languages, customs, and records in America, as well as in other places. So just the fact, guys, that there is theories about this, we've shown all the evidence and all the corroboration as to why. And America is the truer world, so it makes more sense, But the fact that there is theories and then, they have to try to disprove these theories because they don't agree, these specific people, that tells you something. McGregor argues that the Americans could not have been Jews, for the latter people were acquainted with the use of iron as far back as the time of Tubal-Cain. All right, again, there was iron here. You see why they're saying they couldn't be Jews? Because there was iron here. We had iron smelting going on here. Again, all these metals were here, guys, and we have a whole video on that. They also used milk and wheat and bread, which the Americans could and would have used if they had once known of them. So you see, they're trying to say we didn't even have milk here. We didn't even have milk here, they're trying to say. Come on now. So that's your proof that they weren't Hebrews? Montanus believes that America was peopled long before the time of the dispersion of the Jewish tribes, and raises objections to nearly every point that has been adduced in favor of a Hebrew origin. All right. So Montanas, right? Of course, there was people here before the so-called, because this is the true old world. Goes way before that. Of course, the difference of physical organization is alone sufficient to set aside the question of Jewish origin. So they're saying, right? What are they saying? Because they don't look like so-called Jews. What does that look like, right? They're comparing it to modern Israelis and Chasers at this time, guys. And this was written in 1900. Eastern Jews, Eastern Europeans, right? This is before they had created their state, right? So what did we learn the other day, right? In the rocks, they found what? Shemitic, so-called Phoenician, so-called Negro-looking people here in ancient America. It's in the stones. That so conservative a people as the Jews should have lost all the traditions, customs, etc., as their race is observed. Rafinsky advances as objections to the Jew theory that the 10 lost tribes are to be found scattered over Asia, that the Sabbath would never have fallen into disuse if they had once introduced it into America, that the Hebrews knew the use of iron, had plows, and employed writing, that circumcision is practiced only in 1 or 2 locations in America. That's not true. So you see all the reasons they're saying, like these are all things you got to dodge, guys. We had iron, we had writing. Come on, man. Like, this is what I'm saying. But of course, a lot of you want to go with that because you just don't want to believe that the biblical land and biblical people were here. Oh, we're not Hebrews, Kurimeo. Stop trying to make us Hebrew. I'm not trying to make anything. This is the true old world. These are the true biblical lands. Shout out to UBTB for proving that a lot in most all his videos. And shout out to 432 The Drop and everybody else showing the proof. Shout out to Brazor. Shout out to Rafinsky. Shout out to Kingsborough. You know, these writers. So again, so that the sharp striking Jewish features are not found in Americans, that's a lie. We found the phenotypes here again the other day. That the Americans eat hogs and other animals forbidden to the Jews. Now check this out. This is what I'm saying, guys. First of all, they brought the pigs over. Europeans brought the pigs over. We did have wild boars here and pigs, wild, but that doesn't mean everybody in the Americas was eating pig, guys, or hogs, because they brought the pigs. That's such a big hijack right there. You just generalize. So you're saying that all Americans are the same, from all the way to Canada to all the way to the bottom of Argentina and South America. You're saying these are all the same nations? They speak the same language, they practice the same things? No. So yeah, there was probably some that ate hogs, very few of them, because we didn't really have pigs over here until Europeans arrived. Like, this is so much hijack going on in this book right now. This chapter, unfortunately, has a lot of hijack that we have to dodge. But it's good to read this time. So you got to see the opinions of people, because they're literally trying to disprove what has been found. They have to try to make an argument, and their arguments are ridiculous because they didn't eat hogs, just like the Americans do. Who said all Americans ate pig? Come on now. Come on now, man. We have primary sources living with the Indians telling you they didn't eat the unclean animals. We got the videos. Go check them out if you doubt what I'm saying right now. This is ridiculous. That the American war customs, such as scalping and torturing, cannibalism, painting the bodies, and going naked, are not Jewish in the least. Do you see that? He just said everybody's cannibals. He just said all Americans cannibals. He said they're all tattooing. He said they're all naked. That's not true. Come on now. Torturing people, scalping. They're not all doing that. And when they did it for a reason. And he must forget what the ancient Israelites and Hebrews did when they went to war. He must forget. It's written that the American languages are not like Hebrew. Yes, they are. Many, many, many are. We've proven that. We found the inscriptions here, Paleo-Hebrew, all over the Americas, guys. Los Luna stones, come on now. For these and similar reasons, which the reader can easily find in several other works, we are of the opinion that the first Jews who ever set foot on American soil were those who, in spite of the restrictions of Ferdinand and Isabella, secretly went on board the ships which Christopher Columbus and his contemporaries steered to the New World. So, again, this shows his lack of information. He's saying, literally, this is what he's saying, guys, that the Sephardic Jewish people were the first so-called Jews over here. Not knowing that Christopher Columbus is a Portuguese Jew, he's separating them from them. right? These same people, which he didn't quote here, he left out so many books we've read and so many people we've quoted from those times, primary sources. These same people, he's saying, letting us know that they found the lost tribes over here, right? That they found all this stuff over here. He didn't quote none of those. So this is what I mean about everybody in the world is biased, especially when it comes spreading their information or their beliefs to others. Yeah, he left out all those other primary sources. He only quoted the people who were against that those so-called theories, right? Or that truth, because it's his opinions too, because it matches what he wants to believe. Why should not the Irish race, now represented in every nook and corner of the globe, set forth the claim that their modern migratory spirit is an unadulterated inheritance of their pre-Christian ancestors, and that their ancient forefathers who came over to Iberia and Erin, glorious with primordial civilization, as is vouched by the relics of their admirable round towers, simply continue in their western direction and brought to our continent the light that illuminated it with so much brilliancy? You know, it's funny that he has this position now, because we read whole chapters where he's saying that people from here went over there and brought that technology, that building, that people, anybody who crossed the Atlantic, had to have been from here. Come on now, like, we have whole chapters on this, right? And what does he mean, the Irish? Yeah, the Irish. Who are the ancient Irish? They're coming out of so-called Egypt, Canaan. There's Israelites, there's Hamites. There's a lot of different people, biblical people, when it comes to ancient Ireland or Chaldea, right? A lot of hijack going on as we're reading. It's okay, guys. It's okay. Sometimes we got to read this. We got to be able to discern, though. Dennis O'Donoghue, with patriotic piety, writes as follows: the Celtic inhabitants of ancient Erin, in pre-Christian times as well as long after the advent of St. Patrick, held firmly and constantly a belief in the existence, in one shape or another, of a great western land. And they had very probably found similar notions prevailing among the races that had colonized Ireland before they occupied it, all right? Greater Ireland was here. The Celts are supposed to have commenced their migration from Spain into Ireland about 1,000 years before the Christian era. They had been borne along from the far east by the mainstream of colonization, which, as historians and antiquaries assure us, has from the earliest ages steadily flowed from east to west until they landed on the shores of ancient Erin. This western island they colonized and permanently occupied, but beyond it still lay the great western land towards the setting sun, the object of their ancestral belief and ambition. Did those migratory Celts, whose nomadic instincts had urged them from Asia to Ireland, from Asia, right? He just, so they came from Asia? What Asia? North America, Asia Major? Oh yeah, okay. Now, I understand what you're talking about now. Make no movement farther west during the following centuries? It is hard to think that such masterful tendencies as actuated the race have spent all their force within the Irish shores, or that those adventurous Celts, while their faith in the existence of the great western land probably grew more vivid as they advanced in their migration towards the west, made no attempts to put forth, no efforts to approach or reach it during so many ages. It is very probable that many of them still nursed yearnings and aspirations to seek out that mysterious land, and in obedience to these made efforts to penetrate and traverse the wide ocean that lay between them and the object of their desires. And we may well believe that such daring attempts were sometimes crowned with success. Such are the learned pleadings in behalf of a possibility, but they contain no proof of historical fact. All right, so now he's saying, so why wouldn't the ancient Irish or Celts come to the Americas, right? Why would they seen it in reverse? Who are these Celtic people? Where did they really come from? When you're saying they came from somewhere else, right? He said it, right? He said they came from somewhere else. They brought the civilized knowledge. We've broken it down, guys. Remember, if anybody crossed the Atlantic first, it would have been American Indians. There's even a whole chapter in this about Americans discovering Europe in the same book. So yeah, we know they were here. We know they were going back and forth trading, but the origin probably came out of here, guys. This is the true old world. The oldest land is in this area where they're calling Greater Ireland. The claims set forth by a few theories or theorist on behalf of the Greeks and the Romans for the honors of ancient American civilization, are scarcely founded upon any better ground, and in fact the arguments in favor of the latter relate to an epoch posterior to the one under consideration. It is namely said that Rufus, Archbishop of Cosenza, made a present to the Pope of a coin of the region of Emperor Augustus, which had been found in American mines. Listen, okay? This is what I'm saying, man. Put it all together, guys. Again, it is namely said that Rufus, Archbishop of Cosenza, made a present to the Pope of a coin of the reign of Emperor Augustus, a Roman coin which had been found in American mines, and that the Dominican father Joseph de Guerra received from an Indian woman another coin bearing the imprint of Emperor Trajan. All right, listen, where's the true ancient so-called Rome, which she had inherited from her ancestors? But the accounts of the discoveries of these Roman and of similar Greek relics could hardly stand the test of historical criticism. We may well, furthermore, suppose that should the twilight of the pagan civilization of Europe have illumined the supposed barbarian tribes of America, we would find brilliant reports of the glorious feat in our classic authors, who were never slow in recording the great deeds of their country, yet these are silent. But the guys, they did record this, whether it was in mythology or in actual writing, but because they told us these people were on that side, we tend to picture them talking from the other side of the world when they're just talking about their own place right there. When they're giving these names, those ancient names of their towns and cities were here. That's why they don't need to emphasize, oh, we went to another place, because they were talking about places that were already here. They didn't have to. The Spanish discoverers have found descendants of African settlers in America. Now see this. Now they're going to talk about what we were talking about the other day. Just because they found things that relate or look like what people picture as supposed to be a Negro, and they try to say that's only an African, this is when they add their hijack a little bit, right? So again, we noticed before that the models, but can we look to the dark Libyan races for teachers of the bright prehistoric nations of our continent? We noticed before that the models, if not copies of the grand prehistoric monuments of America, are to be found in Polynesia and in East Indies, right? Copies, yeah, they copied us. See, he's seen it in reverse. What we know of civilization in Polynesia would not justify the assumption of America's former civilization originating in its archipelagos. Modern researchers establish the fact that not only in Egypt and Persia, again, that might all be here, that ancient Egypt, ancient Persia, but all over India, the level of literature, science, and culture generally has grown to lower and lower with the lapse of time. And therefore, if the height of prehistoric civilization on our continent must be measured by the standard of its prehistoric works and monuments, we are compelled to the conclusion that if Southern Asia is the source of faded American glory, its first colonies must have arrived in the New World shortly after or before the biblical deluge. All right. So again, seeing it in reverse, I'm going to say this so many times. Can it be supposed that the architects and builders of ancient America's grand and admirable ruins were immigrants from Asia's central and northern countries? Why? Why are you supposing that when you're finding all this evidence here of the old world? Indeed, there hardly remains any doubt, as we will see farther on, that the Tartars or Scythians were among the first ancestors of our modern Indians. Yeah, because this is a true old world, and these nations came out, were here. But while it is well established that no savage nation ever attempted to make far distant settlements, thus the hijack, we colonized the whole world, we cannot base an hypothesis of American civilization upon the data of Tartar or Scythian known history. The fact, therefore, of a civilization that long centuries ago flourished and worked wonders on our continent is an insoluble puzzle, not only for the adepts of the theory of progress, but also for the scientists who refuse to admit the golden age of humanity, original revelation, and consequent civilization, and it has led many serious writers to gravely discuss the question whether it was not Christianity that was the leading cause of the architectural and other wonders, whose ruins we still admire on American soil. All right. So again, man, so much hijack by this author in this chapter.
He's probably going to keep getting worse as the chapter. I'm trying to realize. Now, look what he's saying. It must have been Christianity that brought all this civilized world here. Come on, man. Come on now, guys. All this stuff is ancient before the whole notion of Christianity, that Roman hijack. Come on now. Brought the knowledge and architecture to the American soil. This is the true old world. Stop it, author. These ruins are lasting witnesses of high culture in many respects. And when we consider that today the various degrees of savagery and of civilization all over the earth are in proportion to the knowledge and practice of the Christian religion. So he's crediting civilization to the Christian religion. You see, we're in the mind of a hijack that's writing this book. Wow, we're starting to see. We should not wonder if some authors conclude that America bears evident traces of early Christian evangelization. Well, that whole thing started here, man. You know, Hellenism, Romanized theories, right? That's the hijack. Especially when we take into account the doctrines, as numerous as singular, that are common among Christians and prehistoric civilized Americans. Yeah, because you, oh man, I can't say this so much, guys. I know a lot of you might be confused at what I'm trying to say, but you should see what he's saying is Christian because they find a symbol of the cross. So he's like, oh, there was Christians here because we found a symbol of the cross. This is the kind of stuff they're using, guys. This is what I'm saying. Trust me. This is a lot of hijack. Wow, a lot of hijack. So that's the end of this chapter. All right. Ah, it kind of hurt me to read this chapter. Like it was difficult, right, with all the hijack. But in this hijack, he's shown that there is an evidence of a true old world here, of civilization, of all these practices before so-called Columbus, before Mr. Sarko came, right, the Sephardic Jew. And there was evidence of Hebrews, so-called Hebrews or Israelites here in America and many other nations, not just Hebrews. We can't generalize like these people try to generalize. We can't be like them, guys. This is the true old world. Many different nations were here, many languages, many different phenotypes, as we saw the other day with the stone, the pottery, the terracottas. Many different peoples here. A lot of knowledge. One day this is going to be told correctly. Hopefully, one day we get a book out that's really writing this correctly without theories of other people coming saying, oh, the Egyptians came, the Phoenicians came, the Christians came, the Christians. Oh, man. That's the hijack. They've all been seeing it in reverse. All right. America's a true old world. Well, thanks for sticking around with me to the end of this chapter. Hope it wasn't as hard on you as it was on me to hear all this hijack. But again, as I just said, it proves there is something to ancient America that these guys are trying to disprove now because they're finding all that stuff here. All right. Again, this was chapter 8 of History of America before Columbus with from approved authors and records. All right. This was chapter 8. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.